Good afternoon and welcome to today's Planning, Regulatory and Licensing Committee of Wednesday, 19th of July 2023. Agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. Councillor Eddie Galsworthy, thank you, Mayor. Agenda item number 2, declarations of interest. Members are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and prejudicial interest in respect of matters contained in this agenda in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government and Finance Act 1992 relating to council tax, the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the Members' Code of Conduct. Are there any members who wish to make a declaration of interest for any of the agenda items being discussed today? Councillor John Thomas.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Item 9 in the closed session, private vehicle licence. I take a personal and prejudicial interest in that. I leave the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. I'm going to declare. Councillor Lee Davis.
Thanks, Chair. I just got to leave at 6 o'clock as well.
Thank you, Councillor Lee Davis. I'm going to leave the meeting for agenda item number 6, which is animal boarding establishment license. I've dealt previous with the applicant, and I think it's best I leave for that. Okay, agenda item number 3. P/23/0053 Dragon Park, Abercynon, Merthyr Tydfil to consider the report of the Chief Executive. The report author is Judith Jones and the case officer is David Cross, and I believe David Cross will give us a summary of the report.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just screen share some slides to go with this. Okay. Hopefully you can see the plan in front of you, which is the sort of outlines the extent of this application. So this application relates to an area of land that once formed part of the Dragon Park Industrial Estate, which now largely consists of hard standing areas and rubble following the demolition of the various buildings that previously occupied the site. Members may recall there was a previous application approved back in 2020 for the provision of drainage channels and swales, together with the raising of the ground levels to provide flood defences within the site and to reduce any flood risk to any future development, I think it relates to a nearby culvert that could fail. These works have already been undertaken, and NRW, Natural Resources Wales, have acknowledged that any potential flood risk has been greatly minimised as a result of these works, which enables the site to come forward then for residential development. So full planning permission is put forward to today for the construction of 200 dwellings, which includes 20 affordable units as well. Across the site, there would be 16 different house types comprising a mixture of 1 to 5 bedroom detached, semi-detached, terrace properties and apartments. The principal access into the site would be to the south via the existing roundabout, which would be upgraded. Across the centre of the site, there would be an area of open space that provides a link to a landscaped area to the west and a landscaped active travel route alongside the River Taff on the east. There will also be a multifunctional area of public open space provided at the sort of main entrance into the site. No objections were received from the various consultees. However, we did receive one objection as a result of the publicity exercise, which highlighted concerns with the additional traffic that could have an impact on the school and concerns about the Penchebach train station and children getting access to that station. It was also questioned whether a new bridge to access the primary school would be required. These concerns have already been addressed in the report. The principle of the development is deemed to be acceptable, given that the historic flooding concerns have now been appropriately addressed. It should also be noted that the site is designated as a strategic regeneration area and constitutes previously developed land. The development would make a significant contribution to the provision of new homes within the borough, including the provision of much needed affordable housing. The location of the site is somewhat isolated from the surroundings, which supports a modern housing scheme that integrates well with its immediate context. The design of the houses, the layout of the site, open space provision and strategic landscaping would result in a quality place that is well connected to the existing community. The development would not give rise to any significant ecological implications with appropriate enhancements provided. The existing highway is deemed to have sufficient capacity to accommodate the development, and due to the isolated nature of the site, there would be a limited impact on the amenities of neighbouring residents, of which measures would be put in place to minimise any disruption during the construction phase as well. So for the reasons set out in the report, it is recommended that the application be approved, subject to the conditions set out on page 18 to 26. Just to give you a bit more information on the scheme, I'll just take you through a few slides. I don't know if everyone can see the next slide. So this is an aerial photograph of the site. As you can see, you've got the industrial estate still to the north, and then you've got the main residential areas to the south. And this is sort of an older aerial photograph, so you can see, you know, much of the hard standing areas and the rubble that was left following the clearance of the site. The following slide sets out the proposed layout of the development. So as you can see to the south, we've got the revised or upgraded roundabout, which is essentially in the same place, realigned, coming into the site. You've got an area of open space, which will include various features as part of the ecological enhancements. Along the eastern side of the site, you can see we've got a green corridor with an active travel route that provides, I guess, a relationship there between the development and the River Taff, takes advantage of that. And as I mentioned earlier, in the middle of the site, going from east to west, there is a sort of a green corridor, landscaped corridor, which provides a link then to other nearby bus stops and facilities in the area. The main access runs sort of generally through the centre and sort of meanders through, and there's various changes in material surfaces to create different environments and define the spaces within the site. The houses themselves are kind of sort of set, I guess, in sort of like blocks. So all of the streets have a clear frontage, and in some cases, some of the properties will have frontages on two sides to define some of the corners. The next couple of slides are just to illustrate some of the street scenes, which shows you the sort of variety of house types there will be. So the vast majority are 2-storey, but there are a number of 3-storey properties in key areas, particularly along the south of the site, where you've got that big open space where that sort of scale of development can be accommodated. And obviously, in terms of what was there before, there was obviously quite large industrial units. So this sort of fits in quite nicely with that general scale. Again, you can see some of the, I think this is one of the apartment blocks, and you've got some of the houses. Sort of, there's a sort of a variation in the material finishes to add a bit of interest to the street. And again, this is, I think this one in the middle here, this is sort of fronting to some of the open spaces that you have within the site. So there's a couple of photographs just to highlight what the site is currently like. So the top photo, that's as it stands, the entrance into the site. So this is just coming off the branch off the roundabout. So this area would be improved, but you can see it's a fairly discreet approach into the site, which sort of curves around the existing landscaping. The bottom photo is what they've referred to as a sort of a secondary emergency access to the north of the site. So this is not intended to be for general use, and we've got a condition on there which seeks details on how that will be sort of managed. I understand the developer's going to be talking with the blue light services, fire, ambulance, things like that, to decide how that will be managed, whether there's any sort of barriers or feature put in there to control that. Obviously, in the case of emergencies, it's an alternative approach into the site. But it also provides and maintains a link to the Taff Trail in the area. So as you saw in the aerial photograph, it's that was quite that was an older picture before some of the flood defence works has been implemented. So as you can see on the photo to the top left, there's a bit of a valley which sweeps around the western back part of the site, and this comes across the front. And then just to get a better appreciation of the topography that you can see in the photo to the right, which is in the same area, you can see that, you know, it's got quite sloped embankments either side, and that's part of the flood. So the levels within the site have been raised so that if there was a flood, you know, this would channel any water towards the River Taff. And at the end of the top right photo, there is a stone cascade which is shown on the bottom left picture, and that's where the water would be discharged. This is once you get to the top of the embankment there, where where the flood defence is. This is the general view of the site at the moment. Generally, it's quite flat, but obviously you've got at present quite a few mounds of rubble which is left over from the past development. So a lot of that will obviously, well, all of that will be cleared. And just to give you sort of a sense of this surrounding context, you got some nearby properties which, you know, are quite some distance away, but as you can see, there's quite a lot of vegetation along. This is the western part of the site, so it's quite enclosed. It's very difficult to actually see much within the site from the surroundings other than from the main entrances itself, and all of that is to be retained as part of the development. So if you've got any questions, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. We've got a questions. Councillor Malcolm Colburn.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just noticed the only access onto the site is through the southern roundabout. There's potentially going to be 300 to 400 cars using that site access. Is that one roundabout going to be suitable to deal with that number of cars?
Yes, in short, I suppose the highway engineers have reviewed the design. Obviously, as it stands now, the access is probably too narrow and doesn't accommodate footpaths and things like that. The new junction there would be to appropriate adoptable standards. As you can see in the plan, there's a pedestrian cycle link then to the one side. That road itself will be essentially like the existing road, you know, just branching off into the site. So if you can imagine, the existing road already accommodates pretty much all of Abercanid, so that access would be more than sufficient to accommodate the development. And obviously, as I say, the head of engineering hasn't raised any highway safety concerns on that.
Okay, just strikes me that's a lot of traffic going past, particularly the houses at the front of the site. Has any consideration been given to whether or not the local schools will be able to cope with the number of children that are potentially going to be living on this site?
It's my understanding that the education department have indicated that there is capacity, and I believe is there further improvements to some of the schools as well?
Yeah, so by the time this development is built out, then yeah, there will be sufficient capacity in the local area, in the local schools.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Malcolm Colburn. Councillor Brent Carter.
Yeah, thanks. Just before I ask a couple of questions, Julia, can you elaborate on that comment about the capacity in the schools? Because, you know, I'm a councillor in our ward and live right opposite this site. There's only one school there, that's Abercanid. So could you just elaborate a little bit more about the capacity? And I'm also a governor at the school as well.
Yeah, so the principal policy officer, as has had discussions with education in relation to this. So obviously a site like this gets built out over a number of years. You know, a number of dwellings per year get constructed, and then obviously they look at the capacity moving forward in the local schools, and they've confirmed that there would be sufficient capacity to accommodate the amount of children that may be residing at this site.
Okay, great. Yeah, a couple of questions, if that's all right, Chair. In just touching on to what Councillor Colburn as said, David, in terms of the one access, it is a slight concern with regards to traffic, extra traffic coming through the village. And I'm not sure where your comments allied to in terms of it being near houses. There are houses right opposite the site within, I don't know, 50, 75 yards perhaps across the road. So there will be extra traffic coming through. Why isn't the north allowed to have an access point and an exit point as well then? Why is it just the one entrance and one entrance out? For me, there could be. Obviously, I live in the area. There's 3 potential access points in the north, mid and south. I'm just a bit concerned why the north and the mid haven't been looked at as well to access, especially for houses in the middle. You've got an industrial unit there with a road going in, and there's potential access point there as well. So that's something which I would have thought would have been looked at. And also the bridge coming into Abercanid, the Brandy Bridge, a few years ago had a lot of work done to it because it wasn't safe. I've looked through the report a couple of times. I can't see anything in there about the bridge unless I've missed it. Can you confirm that that's been looked at and there's no issues and no problems with the bridge for the extra traffic, especially the traffic coming in when the people live in there, but also for the bigger wagons and things which are going to go in to build the houses and that sort of stuff?
Well, in terms of the access to the north, obviously I wasn't party to the early discussions as to how to approach the site, but I would suspect that part of the consideration would have been that you would have been directing traffic through, part of an industrial area. So it would have probably not been favourable to introduce that, the development through that only access. In terms of the capacity of the highway, there was a junction capacity study done as part of the highway assessment, which looked at the different roundabouts, not just in front of the site, but also by the bridge and going all the way up to the A470 and the roundabout by the Audi store and the petrol station there. So the capacity study was assessed as part of that, and it was considered that whilst there would be some impacts on those areas, that the highway engineer was satisfied that it would be acceptable and that it could accommodate the traffic. It would not lead to a significant increase in the amount of traffic queuing at the different branches of the roundabouts. And the highway engineer also highlighted that irrespective of whether this development goes ahead or not, there'll be a need in the distant future. I think they referred to 2035, that there will probably be a need to do improvement works on those roundabouts anyway, possibly, and that would be something that would be reviewed by the highway engineers in the future. In terms of the bridge, that's not been flagged as a particular issue by the highway engineers as to whether that, whether the additional traffic generated would cause any further structural harm to that structure.
Sorry, David, perhaps it was just me. You lost me for a minute when you were talking about the different roundabouts. You're talking about Aldi's, etc. I weren't overly concerned about that, but my points were about the roundabout in the village, where you've got the south roundabout, the middle roundabout, and the north roundabout. So my concern was the access points. Why couldn't they? You talked about the north, about going through the industrial unit, but to my mind, I can think of lots of different housing areas where you've got to pass through industrial units to go into housing estates. So I don't see that as an issue, to be honest. So I was concerned about that, and I don't see why they couldn't have had different parts. But obviously, I'm perhaps a little bit late to this planning committee for this as well.
Yeah, and when I was talking about the capacity study of the different roundabouts, that includes all the ones on the approach into Abercanid leading up to the site. So the highway engineer was satisfied that that there was capacity to accommodate the development. I think on some of the roundabouts coming into Abercanid, the main traffic flow is going north-south anyway. You've got some turn-off site where you've got the caravan storage and things like this, or self-storage. So most of the flow is in a sense like a normal road, despite that you've got some sort of minor turn-offs. In terms of why it was preferred to go to the southern side instead of the northern side, I don't have a specific answer on that, other than that there was obviously a roundabout, immediately at the south of the site, which could be adapted, and it may be that there was not scope to improve the roundabout by the bridge, given that you've got other constraints there with the buildings and the bridge and things like that in place.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Councillor Clive Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I got one question, and that is in relation to flood risk management. And on page 9 of the report, it refers to policy 9 that supports flood risk management, that enables and supports sustainable strategic growth and regeneration in national and regional growth areas. I'm aware, Chair, that a lot of work was done, as in your introduction, David, to drainage and swales, and perhaps you could elaborate what swales are. I think somebody's told me in the past, but I can't remember exactly what it is. And you did show a photo of the embankment down to the river. I understand the River Taff is one of the when it's in full flood, it's one of the fastest flowing rivers in Wales, so I understand, because it's literally in large parts going downhill. Can you clarify what the flood risk management was? Because we get monsoons nowadays that are, we don't just have heavy rainfall, they are monsoons. So it comes down in a matter of minutes and into the river. So what assurances have been given? And I think they look at figures like an event once in 1,000 years. What assurances have you been given as planners that is completely unlikely ever for this estate of 200 properties to suffer a flood risk? Because I haven't been on to the site and I don't know, couldn't see from the photograph how far down it is to the river.
So on this plan here, is this what we could? Let's go back. So on the plan here, can you see there's a sort of a brown sort of shaded area which runs across the sort of the western part, and then it wraps around to the south. So that is essentially the swale, the ditch, which is what, if there is a flood, it basically channels it through to the watercourse.
Right.
But the flood risk was not associated with heavy rainfall or anything like, or even necessarily from the River Taff bursting its banks or anything like that. It was to do with a culvert over on the western part of the site, and if that failed, there was that flood risk. So this in order to address the flood risk, obviously that was as a feature, was probably the main feature that was introduced, so that if there was a flood, it would just carry it away from the residential area. The levels, as you can see, are raised as well, and so that would mean that any flood that travels through that swale would essentially not rise above the banks. And so that was the main sort of features. The road coming into the site, then there's actually a culvert that would go under the road, so that would allow the water to pass like under a bridge essentially, and that would then discharge into the watercourse. And as part of the last application, following that approval, which included all the technical details for this, it was requested then by NRW to remodel. Well, a modelling exercise was further carried out to assess what the flood risks. That was then passed to NRW. They've reviewed that and assessed that, and as part of their comments to this application, they were satisfied that the flood risks were very minimal and that it would be managed. So essentially, NRW, who are one of the key sort of statutory bodies that deal with the floods, are satisfied with the appropriate flooding measures, protection measures in place.
Right. So the swales are that channel there on the one side, in the blue line on there. That'll take all the excess water coming from wherever into the estate and from other places. So that's one thing. But beyond that, there is the river. So NRW have looked at that and said the swales are sufficient. And even if the river Taff is in full flood, there is no possibility at all of any of the excess water coming onto the estate. Because because I said I haven't seen it, and probably other members have, but at that point the estate will be built up. So is the river quite low down from the end of the estate?
Yeah, I'll come back to the photos. So perhaps slow. Yeah, so the three photos there. So as you can see on the top right, that's the embankment on the left-hand side. That's where the development is.
Right.
The fence you see on the right-hand side, that's roughly where the road is. So eventually there will be an access that crosses one embankment to the other. So that's actually quite deep, you know,
Right.
the depth of that. And at the end of that, on the top right, at the end of that sort of green channel, as I say, there's a stone cascade, and again that's a fair few meters well above the River Taff as well. So that would have all been taken into consideration as part of the whole flood modelling exercise. They would have looked at, you know, what's the effects from the culverts, what's the effects from the River Taff, and also part of the commentary that NRW said is that they were satisfied that in the event of a flood that it wouldn't disperse it to other areas, so it hasn't made it worse for the surrounding properties as well.
Yeah, the reason, Chair, I asked the question is that in the past there has been flooding, certainly down into Aberfan. And I think I can remember at some stage there was a certain amount of flooding in Trorrew. But obviously this is higher up. By the sound of it, the river is well below the level of what will be the complete houses.
Yes,
Is that correct?
that's correct. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clive Jones. Any other members with questions? Nobody's indicating. I just got one. It's a small one, David. It's in regard to community investment, community infrastructure levy with sale. Because it's such a large development, is there money going to be set aside from the development to help the local authority deliver the infrastructure needed?
Yes, there would be a SIL requirement. It'd be at £25 per square metre. Obviously, I don't have what that would amount to in full, but obviously there's 200 houses. Some of those are 3 stories, so it would be a considerable contribution.
Lovely. Thank you, David. Oh, Councillor Brent Carter.
Thanks, Chair. Just quickly then, David, would that come to the ward councillors to spend on local community projects instead of the authority?
It would go into the general pot, and you've got your 1, 2, 3 list. So you guys get to decide what you want to put it towards.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Any comments from members? Councillor Clive Jones.
I can't remember seeing a planning application for new properties on the estate where there's been 16 different house types, from 1 to 5 bedroom attached, semi-detached, terraced apartment properties, and there's 2 apartment blocks are also proposed, and blocks 3-story would accommodate 9 1-bedroom units. So it seems to me right across the board there is accommodation that's badly needed for all types of family units. And I note there are 26 planning conditions there as well for this. So for one, I am happy that this application should be approved.
Thank you, Councillor Clive Jones. Councillor Malcolm Colburn.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to see a brownfield site being brought back into use. I think it's a good use of the land, and it'll provide much needed houses for the area. And as Clive Jones said, different types of housing as well. So yeah, I'm fully in support of this application.
Thank you, Councillor Malcolm Colburn. Councillor Brett Carter.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I do have one or two concerns in respect of the site, etc. That being said, however, I'm satisfied with the answers David's provided today. Thank you, David. In terms of the site itself, obviously as one of the ward councillors there, I live actually opposite the site. So I've been looking at it for the last 20 years in the various different states of repair, especially with the bridge going over and the Hoovers Tower, etc. as well, and the problems we've had there. So I actually welcome the site, welcome the housing for the area. It'll also be good for the local businesses as well, attracting new people into the area as well. And it'll also be good for the school. I know there's capacity in the school, Judith. That's why I was asking as well, just to confirm. So I think it'd be really, really good for the area. So I welcome it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brett Carter. Any other members for comments? Okay, nobody's indicating. Can we take it to the vote then, please? Oh, sorry. Somebody move it. Councillor Clive Jones moves. Seconded.
Yes, I'll say.
Seconded by Councillor Clive Tully. Okay, we voting by hand again. Yeah. So all members in favour, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous and that's passed. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, agenda item number 4, Merthyr Tydfil Replacement Local Development Plan 2016 to 2031 Supplementary Planning Guidance Note Town Centre Conservation Area Management Plan. Consider the report of the Chief Executive. The report author is Craig Watkins, and I believe that Craig will be presenting tonight's report, which is seeking approval to consult on a draft version of the supplementary planning guidance. A final version with any potential changes will be brought back to committee for approval at a later date. And as part of the consultation, Craig has indicated that he will be arranging a session with this committee to answer any specific queries in relation to the supplementary planning guidance and the evidence behind it. Oh, yeah, Judith.
Yeah, Craig wasn't able to attend tonight, so I'll just introduce the report. A draft supplementary planning guidance note that covers the town centre conservation area management plan is being presented to committee to be approved for public consultation. Representations received on the SPG as part of the consultation will then be considered by the planning policy team and reported back to planning committee alongside any appropriate changes to the SPG in order for the guidance note to be formally adopted. The SPG builds on the findings of a conservation area appraisal and conservation area management plan commissioned by Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council using grant funding from the Heritage Lottery Fund. The SPG will guide future development within the conservation area in a manner that preserves and enhances its special character and appearance, whilst also raising awareness of the area's heritage and facilitating improvements to the built environment of the conservation area through coordinated enhancement schemes. The document will be available in hard copy at Unit 5, Civic Centre and the libraries, and stakeholders can also contact the planning policy team via telephone if they do not have internet or email access. The consultation will commence on Monday the 31st of July for 6 weeks, concluding on the 11th of September so that it goes beyond the school holidays. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Judith. Any questions from members? Councillor Clive Jones.
Just about to ask what the dates were for the consultation period. Now, I think we need to get this right. I don't know whether, Chair, the 6 weeks during the month of August, when a lot of people are on holidays, etc., it might have, when the officers look at it, it's thought the best time to do it is when the schools are not in. I don't know whether this 6 weeks period is really the right time, frankly, because I think we need to make sure that we get as many members of the public in the county borough of Merthyr Tydfil replying to this consultation. The other matter is the briefing that Craig Watkins has offered us as a planning committee. I replied to him. I forgot to include all the other planning committee members, but I made the same point to him. I asked him a question: is it likely for this briefing session to be held in August? We've got a recess there, and my view was this briefing session should be sometime in September. And he replied saying, well, you know, that may be opportune after the consultation period has finished. So I'd be interested to know what your views are as planners about having this consultation period during August.
I'd happily extend the consultation period to 8 weeks so that it runs to the end of September, and then have the briefing with members perhaps at the start of September. I mean, you know, there's a school of thought that perhaps people have more time during the holidays to look at this, but, you know, I totally appreciate the comments made. So we could extend it to 8 weeks. We still start on the 31st of July, but it would then run to the 25th of September, and we could arrange the briefing session for committee members early September.
I would accept that, Chair, the extension, but perhaps have the briefing session just a bit later on. Do we need to have the briefing session within the consultation period, or, you know, right at the end?
My thinking was, in case residents, you know, ask members questions, if you've had the briefing session, then you might be better placed to answer questions.
Okay, right. Okay. I mean, maybe if it's going on to the 25th of September, have the briefing session sort of later on.
Okay.
And not necessarily during the first week of September when the production line starts up all over again.
Thank you, Councillor Clive Jones. Any other members with questions? Nope. Any members with comments? Nope, nobody's indicating. Okay, can we have someone to move this, please? Councillor Clive Tovey, seconder. Councillor Clive Jones. We take it to the vote, which is asking specifically to give the committee's approval to commence a 8 week.
8 week.
8 week now consultation. Okay, if we can raise our hands, everyone in favour? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone, and that's passed. Yeah, anyone that doesn't have to be here can go.
Yeah.
While Clive's getting ready. Agenda item number 5. Delegated report is information only. Agenda item number 6. I've declared an interest in this, so I'm going to vacate and pass over to Clive.
Next item on the agenda is the animal boarding established. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, just for clarification, if a member's declared an interest, do they have to leave the chamber altogether, or? Yes, I'm looking after the protection of the particular councillor here.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Oh,
I wasn't having a go at the member. I think for his own sake, that's, yeah.
Next item on the agenda is an animal boarding establishment licence, a Dog's Den day care at 14 Pant Industrial Estate. Joanne Baber is going to outline the report for us.
Thank you, Chair, members. So this report is in relation to an animal boarding establishment licence application, which was submitted by Mr Julian Bones in respect of Dog's Den Daycare, Units D and E, 14 Pant Industrial Estate, Dowlas. A copy of the application form and the accompanying plan is attached at Appendix A of the report. An inspection was carried out by a licensing officer and a veterinary surgeon on the 13th of June 2023. The vet subsequently produced a report of the inspection to the licensing department, which can be found at Appendix B of the report. This authority has a set of standard conditions that are attached to all animal boarding establishment licenses, and these can be found at Appendix C of the report. As outlined in the vet's report, the premises was failing to comply in 4 areas of the authority's standard conditions. The report also recommended additional conditions to be attached to this specific licence, should it be granted. The report was served on the applicant, who on the 5th of July provided his comments on the various paragraphs of the vet's report, along with additional evidence in support of his application. A copy of the redacted response / comments and additional evidence are attached at Appendix D of the report. It was also apparent from the inspection that the term kennel, which is used in the authority's standard conditions, is not applicable to this particular premises, as the pens used do not have a combined sleeping and individual exercise area. Members are therefore asked for this specific application to consider removing the kennel conditions, which are not relevant to this premises, and amending the term kennel to time-out pen for all other conditions. A licensing subcommittee hearing was held on the 6th of July to allow both the applicant and the vet, who is Mr Mike Jessup, the opportunity to make verbal submissions on the proposed application. The applicant advised on the 5th of July that he would not be in attendance, but instead submitted the comments and evidence, which is attached as Appendix D. At subcommittee, the vet submissions and the comments and evidence of the applicant were considered by members, and a link for the recording of that meeting has been circulated to all members of today's committee to allow you to consider the submissions and comments made. In that hearing, Mr Jessup confirmed that, taking into account the evidence submitted by the applicant, he was not opposed to the licence being granted, provided additional conditions were added to the council's standard conditions. Mr Jessup also confirmed that he agrees with changing the term kennel in the council's standard conditions to time-out pen for this specific application. To assist members today, amended conditions that could be attached to the specific licence, should it be granted, are attached as Appendix E of the report. In determination of this matter, the steps councillors may take are outlined in section 2.1 of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Has anyone got any questions? Councillor Clive Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think I've ever read a vet report like this, and I can't remember in the years I've been on planning, dealing with licensing, whether we've had a situation like this before. I'm aware of Mr. Jessup. He's a highly regarded veterinary surgeon with many years experience. And having read his report, particularly pages 45 and 46, and the absolute litany of different items that, when he viewed the premises, hadn't been done. I then read his conclusion with his 4 recommendations, but on top of his 4 recommendations, Chair, there are 3 specific areas to ensure future compliance, and there are 6 areas of specific areas to ensure future compliance. So I've said all that as a run-up to the question, are the officers completely satisfied that this gentleman would abide by all those areas that are failing, plus the specific areas to ensure future compliance and the additional clarifications?
That's a difficult question to answer, really, Councillor Jones. I think for us, all we can go on is if the conditions that can already be met are being met now, then that should warrant a licence being issued. The ones to ensure future compliance are, as Mr. Bones is currently unlicensed, he wouldn't necessarily need to have those records at the moment. So it's only when he becomes licensed and starts operating as a licensed dog boarder, then those conditions he would need to comply with from that date. So we would, as Mr. Jessup recommends, do an unannounced inspection a short time into the licence period, if one was granted, to determine whether the conditions were being complied with, and if they weren't, we would at that early opportunity be able to look at taking action then. But as an officer, you can never guarantee whether an applicant is going to be compliant with conditions or not.
Because, Chair, a doubt I've got in my mind is that he was carrying on trading, didn't realise that he had to renew a licence, then was notified that he shouldn't continue. Then it took him some months from last December before he made application. So it's cast doubt in my mind as to exactly what this, does he know what he's doing currently, leave alone complying with a whole list of conditions in the future?
I think all I can say to that is Rhys, who's the licensed officer, was dealing with this. I've only ended up doing the report because Rhys went on leave just before the committee hearings. But he has provided, and as Mr. Jessup, as the vet, all the advice and guidance that we can to Mr. Bones. So if he isn't aware of what he should be doing, it's not because he hasn't been given the right guidance and advice.
No. Was Rhys, through you, Chair, was Rhys, have you been to the premises? Were you there with Mr. Jessup? Was there?
Yes, I attended with Mr. Jessup for the inspection. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've seen the condition as it is currently?
Yeah, I've seen it as per when the vet did the report, the recommendations that certain things needed to be done to bring it into compliance to be licensed. Yes.
And what was your view when you know, Mr. Jessup has put a full report in here, but as one of the licensing officers with him, what was your view at the time when you came in to see the premises?
But, as per Mr. Jessup's report, really, there were certain things lacking that Mr. Bones needed to complete and bring the premises into line with the conditions. Provided he does that, then, as the licensing manager has explained, it would be a case for us to go back on an unannounced visit to ensure compliance. Yeah.
And the fact, Chair, that he wasn't prepared, he said he couldn't afford, I think he said he couldn't afford a solicitor to attend with him, but he wasn't prepared to, and he was asked to attend that subcommittee, but he wasn't prepared to attend. So those elected members present couldn't ask him questions directly. So it doesn't fill me full of confidence that this person would be a fit and proper person and to comply with all the conditions as laid down by Mr. Jessup.
If I can add one thing, and Joe can correct me if I'm wrong. These licenses, well, this license be granted today would only run up until the 31st of December. I think it's a throwback to the old days where all licenses started on the 1st of January. So normally, if you granted a license, it lasts for the length of the license, which is a year, 3 years sometimes. But this one would only last until the end of the year. In that time, there would be an unannounced visit, and I would recommend that visit is done sooner rather than later within that period. If there's issues then, non-compliance, then Mr. Jessup, who would be on the inspection, would pick it up, and then we can bring it back then straight away, or even at the conclusion of this license, which would, let's say, last until the 31st of December.
Sorry, can I ask a question then? So does he sign with all this list? Because there's four areas that Mr. Jessup is concerned with, but there's a whole host of other areas where he's made a comment. So does he sign an agreement that he will abide by every one of those recommendations and the specific areas and the additional condition clarifications?
No, Councillor Jones. So basically, the licence would be issued with those conditions attached, and it's his responsibility to ensure compliance with each and every condition. And if he doesn't, then action can be taken against his licence, which could include revocation of the licence.
And if he doesn't comply, how long does that take? You issue him with a notice? Does that go on for some weeks? And then does it ultimately mean that he could, in a short space of time, I'm not saying it would happen, could be taken to court?
I don't, not necessarily to court. We'd have to double check the constitution, but based on the fact that we have to come here to get additional conditions added, I would assume we would come back to you with a report with a recommendation of action to be taken, which could include revocation.
Chair, I think that could come to a subcommittee, actually. I think we're here today because we are essentially looking to see whether or not you want to add these additional conditions.
Yeah.
It was open to the subcommittee. If they were happy with Mr. Bones's application back 2 weeks ago, the subcommittee could have granted that license there and then. But of course, they heard the representations from Mr. Jessup, and obviously, basically, we're looking to attach additional conditions today. But yeah, I think if there's any action that flowed from an inspection, that would come quickly back to the subcommittee.
Right. Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Finished, yeah. Councillor Colburn.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, sorry if I'm missing something here, but the conclusion says the facility fails on compliance in 4 areas, and it lists, and it says these should be completed prior to the granting of a licence. So are we satisfied that those 4 areas have now been addressed?
Yes, Mr. Jessup was asked that question specifically, that he was happy that those 4 areas have been addressed. But then he was saying, but if, that's good, he said, but if you're going to grant a license, he wanted those additional ones as well.
Right, okay, yeah. So he's now compliant on those areas, but we still need all these different bits, which he can't do until he's got the license. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor Michelle Jones.
It was just a quick question around the drainage. I know it seems a bit strange, but if you've got 20 dogs, if they're molting at certain times of year, I know what it's like with my dog, and it's a nightmare. But I'm concerned because we have a dog groomers over in Swansea Road, and the number of complaints I receive from the businesses in the Swansea Road shops in regards to the drainage getting blocked. And I was just wondering if that has been taken into consideration.
I don't know is the honest answer, Councillor Jones. I can certainly raise it with Mr. Jessup if a licence was granted and we did then go out to do an uninspected an unannounced visit. Is something that we can ask Mr. Jessup to take into account for that inspection.
Sorry, that's great. Can I just ask a question in regards to this? So with the Swansea Road shops, this isn't really relevant, but who is in charge of making sure that the businesses are adhering with making sure that they're not blocking businesses' drains? Would it be, do I go to environmental health or is it to yourselves? Oh, environmental health?
Drainage, council drainage. With environmental health, maybe if it's creating a statutory nuisance, then maybe be a joint approach.
Okay, thank you very much.
Business internal.
Are there any other questions for Joe? No. Are there any comments? Councillor Jones?
I think the issue here is that we have to safeguard the animals. And we have to try and ensure that we are happy for the owners of the animals. I've got doubts in my mind whether this individual will run this business tickety-boo and will always comply with all these conditions. I honestly have. But having said that, I think we have to give him a chance. And I think, frankly, in this case, the officers have to be on the money with this, on the ball, to ensure that these premises are functioning with everything in here that he's operating according to. And I'm with you. I think an unannounced visit should take place. I wouldn't stipulate a time, and probably more than one unannounced visit is required in this instance.
Are there any other comments? Oh, Councillor Scott Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would think I would agree with Councillor Clive Jones in respect of more than one unannounced visit should be made. And also with his comment regarding giving the gentleman a chance to obviously prove what he's worth. So with those comments, Chair, I move the application to be approved.
Yes, as there are three options, you get the feeling that recommendation C is probably to grant the licence subject to the amended conditions. So,
Yeah, then Chair, I would move option C then as to be.
would someone like to second option C? Option C. So we'll take it to the vote by hand. In favour of sections recommendation C. Oh, that's unanimous then. Thanks for that. Yeah, perhaps we get Councillor Salmon back in. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that, Clive. Okay, agenda item number 7, 5-year revision of statement of licensing policy under Licensing Act 2003. To consider the report of the Deputy Chief Executive. The report author is Joanne Baber, and I believe that Joanne would be giving a summary of the report.
Thank you, Chair members. So this report is in relation to the 5-year review of the authority's statement of licensing policy. Section 5 of the Licensing Act 2003 requires a licensing authority to prepare and publish a statement of licensing policy every 5 years. The current policy was published in January 2019, so we therefore must review the current policy and approve a revised one for publication in January 2024. Before publishing a new policy, there are a number of statutory consultees who must be consulted, as outlined in paragraph 3.3 of the report. We will also consult with all other responsible authorities, as well as the other organisations listed in 3.1 of the draft policy. The consultation period will last 12 weeks. The Licensing Department has prepared a draft revised policy to go out for consultation, which is attached at Appendix A of the report. When preparing the revised policy, the Council must have regard to the statutory guidance issued by the Home Office. A revised version of that guidance was issued in December 2022, and where appropriate, this has been reflected in the Council's revised policy. There have also been a number of legislative changes that have been incorporated into the revised policy. The main changes from the existing policy are set out in paragraph 3.7 of the report. And the recommendation to members today are that the draft policy be agreed as the basis of a revised policy to be subject to a public consultation. That if relevant responses are received during the consultation period which require amendments to the draft policy, it will be brought back before this committee for agreement before being taken to full council for adoption, for approval and adoption. And that if no amendments are made to the policy following the consultation period, it will be taken straight to full council for approval and adoption. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Joanne. Any questions from members? Councillor Clive-Jones.
Being consistent, and I probably have missed it. When's the consultation period start and finish?
So I'm looking to start it next Wednesday, which I believe is the 26th of July, and it'll then finish on, I think it's the 8th or 18th of October.
Oh, right. So it
It's
goes
12
it's
weeks.
12, all right.
It's 12
Okay,
weeks.
that's fine. Thank you. It is, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Clive-Jones. Any other questions from members? Any comments from members? Nobody's indicating. Okay, can we have someone to propose this? Councillor John Thomas proposes. Do we have someone to second the motion? Councillor Clive-Jones. Can we take this to the vote then, please? We raise our hands. Okay, everyone's raised. Unanimous. Thank you very much. Brent is waving. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Agenda item number 8. Any other business deemed urgent by the chair? I have none. Agenda item number 9, exempt in order for the following to be considered in private. It's suggested that the public be excluded from the meeting on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined under Part 4 of Schedule 12A, Section 100 of the Local Government Act 1972. Thank you, John. Do we have a proposer for this? Councillor Clive-Jones, and a seconder, Councillor Scott Thomas. Can we take it to the vote then, please? Section 100. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much.